Voters in British Columbia will choose a new government this weekend, and the polls suggest they may return the old government, the NDP, to power. NDP leader and Premier John Horgan called the election a year before the fixed date, hoping to win a majority to replace his minority government. He's campaigned on the need to continue pandemic relief measures. His opponents, Liberal leader Andrew Wilkinson and Green leader Sonia Furstenau, have criticized Horgan's decision to call the snap election early while the province is dealing with COVID-19. With just a couple of days left in the campaign, let's look at how it's gone so far and what to expect on voting day. Ian Bailey is a reporter with the Globe and Mail. He joins me from Vancouver. Ian Bailey, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
Good to see you too, Peter.
Look, how has the pandemic changed the way the campaign is unfolding in British Columbia?
Well, it's interesting. You know, the leaders are not doing the things that we take for granted in elections. They are traveling around the province. They are meeting with partisans, but it's happening in very small groups with social distancing and masks. The media is not on any kind of bus or any kind of plane following the leaders around per se, but TV reporters, newspaper photographers and others are showing up for events and capturing footage, that way.
Right.
We are, members of the media, we do dial into daily news conferences with the leaders. We, call them in every day, and we're putting the questions to them on the campaign trail that we normally would put to them.
All right.
But it's just, everything's a little bit more at a distance.
Sure. Let me ask you, there's almost daily criticism from the other party leaders for John Horgan about the fact he called this election early. Is it having an effect on his campaign?
Well, no, the polls suggest that it's not having any effect. The NDP remains out in front, Liberals behind the Greens in third place. As recently as today, Sonia Furstenau, leader of the Green Party, an event I was listening to earlier this morning, was sharply attacking Mr. Horgan for calling this election at this time. Andrew Wilkinson will be speaking to the media later today, and I expect he will do the same. But it doesn't really seem to be shaking or adjusting the dynamic of this campaign in any substantive way.
All right. What about voter turnout? Pandemic cases have hit a record numbers lately in BC. And what's being said about how COVID-19 could affect voter participation? What's happening?
Well, the Elections BC, the provincial agency that manages elections, started planning for an election during a pandemic, or as the pandemic began. And they've put in the resources for a significant amount of mail-in voting. And mail-in voting, which usually gets about 6,500 voters participating, is way up in this campaign. We have numbers today, and I'm just going to look down at some of them.
Sure.
Elections BC has received 1 million ballots in the mail from voters. These are ballots that voters have sent back in. The highest ever advanced turnout in BC of 681,055 votes cast. So people are finding ways to cast their ballots. People are finding ways, it seems, to sort of make their views known, although we'll have final numbers, obviously, over the weekend, and actually we'll hear more tomorrow with a briefing from Elections BC. Have
there been any policy surprises? I understand how measures to deal with a pandemic could suck up all the interest in the campaign. Is anybody trying to sort of think outside that box, or is it all about the pandemic?
There's been an interesting policy from the BC Liberals, a proposed suspension for a year of the 7% provincial sales tax. That was an interesting idea. And then cutting it in the year after that, which was certainly interesting. The NDP has proposed a pandemic relief payment of $1,000 for families with incomes of $125,000 and under. Those two come to mind as some of the more, especially the sales tax cut, some of the more interesting policies. Regionally, there's been an interesting proposal from the Liberals to hold a referendum on a plan in the city of Surrey, the province's second most populous city, to oust the RCMP and replace some of the new municipal force. But so those are some of the more interesting ideas that have come along from the parties at this point.
Campaigns are often plagued by a misstep here or there. Have there been any really serious ones that may have turned the campaign one way or the other?
There have been a succession of missteps, some of them linked to Zoom calls and sort of video events. Something that that have sort of occurred during the campaign. In one case, there was a member from the North Shore who made some toxic remarks about a New Democrat MLA in a retirement roast for another Liberal MLA. It forced the Liberal leader to deal with this. The news conference called to deal with his platform release. A member of the Liberal caucus was ousted because of remarks he made in an all-candidates meeting on Zoom about the NDP's policy on providing free contraception. There was an interesting event during the televised debate where Mr. Horgan and Mr. Wilkinson fumbled questions on white privilege.
Right.
That prompted them the next day to offer the correct answers on the issues, which they basically did. And it sort of brought which is rare in a BC campaign. I've been here for about 6. This is my 6th, I believe. Which is rare in a British Columbia campaign to have issues of diversity flaring up in a campaign. And Nathan Cullen has been in trouble for some remarks he's made. Former NDP MP is running in the North about a rival candidate, a Liberal candidate also running in the North.
All right. But it would seem like that Mr. Horgan's headed for victory and likely with a majority this time. And just let our viewers know they can watch BC election coverage right here on CPAC on Saturday night. Ian Bailey, thanks so much for taking time to speak with me today. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.